Welcome back to the Pit Stop Podcast. I'm Braydon Dowler-Coltman. I am joined by Jordan Dowler-Coltman, and returning to our show, we have Tyler WALZAK. Welcome back to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. After the weekend, I had to come back on.
We had to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this whole night for five days now.
Right on. I know Jordan was absolutely incensed. We talked at length about it on our other show, the HatTrick Sports podcast. Jordan, how are you doing? Have you simmered down, or are you still revved up?
I think I have, it comes and goes in waves. I've definitely, for the most part, I think I've moved on. I've just accepted that the world is an unfair and unjust place. But
the world or the FIA rules? No,
the world. It comes and goes. Every once in a while on Instagram, when all of a sudden you see the prize giving at night, and you're just like, fuck, this isn't right. And I don't know if you saw tonight, but they Mercedes officially announced today, and I know I'm kind of jumping the gun here. We'll get into last race, but Mercedes officially announced they were dropping their formal appeal and kind of dropping all their legal action to try to finally get the right result. But then they released what looks like a hostage video of Toto Wolff, and he's sitting kind of like we are right now in a Zoom call with a blank backdrop, but he's wearing a black turtleneck and that's it. And he looks like either a Bond villain or he's been captured by a Bond villain. It's very, very Eastern European and very funny.
Maybe he's been caught by Lawrence Stroll. Let's get going. Okay, well, we had some very steep expectations. Would you say, Tyler, that your predictions met your expectations? I mean, I already know your answer to this. You were not satisfied. But I know there's one thing you were satisfied about, and that's Pierre Gasly's finish.
Yes. I mean, sort of, and also no, because I'm so incensed with what happened in the overall race that for 3 days, I was no longer a Formula One fan.
Okay.
For 3 days, I was like, this to me, it doesn't make any sense. There's 3 or 4 different ways they could have ended this race under the rules of the FIA that would have been, if they wanted a finishing race. So I get that nobody wants to finish under a safety car. I understand that. But there's 2 options to do if that's the choice. Don't let the cars get unlap themselves. If you want a finishing race, just have the race go with those 3 or 4 cars between the 2 racers. Or if you really want a competition, call a red flag. And then let's do 1 lap. Both teams get to choose their tires and let's go. But I honestly, until I listened to your guys' HatTrick podcast 2 nights ago or last night, and I was calm. I was calm before I listened to what you guys were talking about. And Elliot, I don't know you, but I don't know what you think you're talking about. It incensed me to think that if you want that type of ending, go watch the WWE. That is what that was. It was a scripted ending to have it reminded me of, I don't know if a lot of people know about the Montreal Screwjob, which happened in the 90s when Bret Hart was supposed to leave the WWF with the championship and have this wonderful career. And then without anyone telling him, Shawn Michaels pinned him and they totally screwed over Bret Hart without him knowing. And this is what that felt like. I'm not I don't watch wrestling now, but I know that scenario. There's been a bunch of documentaries about it. And it's this was a race that it was over. He was 11 or 12 seconds ahead of Verstappen. It was over.
Yeah,
and
11 seconds
and then
ahead.
when they said, okay, well, yeah, 11 seconds ahead. And so talking to a Verstappen fan that I know who drives me nuts because he's just happy that Verstappen won. And I'm like, I don't know how Verstappen is happy with this outcome. Because it didn't make any sense. It was chosen. He was chosen to be the new winner. And there's so many other things that could have made this a good ending that I was like, Drive to Survive got me into F1 100%. But I am no longer watching the races in the morning so that I can watch Drive to Survive's next season. Drive to Survive is now a secondary factor for my entertainment value in F1. And what happened I'm getting heated, but what happened on Sunday was disappointing to anyone that's an actual fan of the sport. And that's frustrating to me because if Verstappen came back and won, I'd be sitting here and be like, congrats, 21, 22, 23, however old he is. Unbelievable. We are about to see the future. If they can get an engine, because I don't know if they're going to be able to get their engine next year, like just to create your own engine out of nowhere is wild to me. But if they have a car, Verstappen's the guy for the next 8 years, and that's awesome. But this is not how he should be starting his legendary career. And I don't know how he's happy with that. I don't know how FIA and F1 is happy about that. But it's just so frustrating because it was a good race. And so going back to the guy I talked to, the Verstappen fan, is his only point was, well, what about if Lewis Hamilton? What if Lewis Hamilton had that? He should have had a penalty on that first turn when he took over the lead and he went through the chicane. 100% accurate. It should have been give that spot back or 5-second penalty. And what I told him was, I'm not a Hamilton fan. I'm not a Verstappen fan. So the outcome of the race doesn't matter to me. It's how it was determined that matters. So if Lewis gave that spot back and Verstappen held it until the end of the race, and then this happened, he would be furious.
Oh, they'd all be furious.
Yeah. And imagine if Red Bull was on the other side of this, and for the next week, we had to hear Christian Horner and Verstappen talking about this. Like, to me, there's just I have to go now.
Well, that's just it, right? You watch in the moment, you can see the frustration, but even Hamilton got out of his car, congratulated him. You saw Toto Wolff go over and congratulate the team.
No, that is not Toto.
Well, he shook Verstappen's hand at the end of the race.
No, he didn't. Toto Wolff never left the Mercedes garage or their offices.
Oh, so it must have been another constructor or another engineer. But
Jordan, I'm sure many of the constructor, the engineers.
Let's get into it more here, Jordan. And I just want to correct everybody from here on out. It's Sir Lewis Hamilton.
That's right. I thought they were going to pull a switch on that too, and all of a sudden
Verstappen
get knighted instead.
So Hamilton not the winner of this race, Jordan. What else do you have to say here about this?
I feel like I have said a lot of it. As I said on the other show, I'm just sad. Like the whole thing just really disappoints me. You know what I mean? Like I was really angry the day of both of you know, I called both of you. We had long, me mostly ranting conversations because I was just angry. Like as a sports fan, you know, there have been many situations where your team loses or like a player, you know, someone you cheer for loses, and it's hard, right? You come up with all kinds of excuses, all kinds of reasons why. You blame the refs, you blame the conditions, whatever it is. But in the end, you can kind of rationalize that and accept that. Like if you lose under like the normal circumstances of a game, you were beat, your team was swept, whatever it is, it hurts, but you move on. Yeah. This is different because it doesn't feel like the laws of the sport were followed. The rules we all accepted weren't followed, and they weren't followed at like the highest level of failure, right to the very top of how this sport is conducted, right? The reason you have a race director who is responsible for making these decisions is to ensure that all of these teams, all of these drivers are held to a somewhat unified standard. That's the idea. In the perfect world, that's the goal, right? Every one of these drivers should be in a position where if they commit close to the same type of infraction as some other driver, the same consequences should be there. The race director is supposed to be able to sit on high and make those decisions. And for the most part, to be fair, I think considering how fast a sport it is and how quickly things happen in the sport, I think you have to give some credit to how this sport has been run to suggest that most of the time, even when there's difficult decisions, you kind of accept that, yeah, they made the best choice they could have. This is the complete opposite. This just feels like a complete breakdown of how the system is supposed to function. And it's too easy to say it's just Michael Massey, but obviously he's the figurehead and he's at the front of it. So that's a part of it. Yeah. But the reality is, as Tyler said, it throws such a negative shadow over what should have been and could have been another great moment in what was already an amazing season. Did both drivers deserve to win going into that last race? Absolutely. They both had amazing stories over the course of the season. Whether you're a Max fan, a Lewis fan, or neither, you have to admit it was an amazing season, especially if you have watched in recent years where Mercedes and Lewis has dominated. Would I say it's boring? No, I still got excited watching those races, but it's always kind of tiring when a team goes on like a dynasty style thing and you look for the underdog or somebody else to come up and take it away from them. But not like this, right? And that's the thing that's frustrating about it is, as Tyler said too, I think in a little while, once the sort of glow of victory wears off and the original energy and excitement, I think it will become more clear that both for Red Bull and Max, it's a bit of a false victory. They won't say that outwardly, but I'm sure there's that creeping feeling of, I wish I hadn't won it like that. I wish we'd won it straight up. But they get to live with that. That's theirs, not, you know, that's not on us. But that's where I kind of come down on it now. Am I mad? Yeah, I guess so. And I would also go back to Tyler, I think teed a lot of things up for me really well here, because the other thing for me about the drive to survive part of this is that he's 100% right. We don't want to be watching a reality TV show when we're supposed to be watching a sporting event, right? Yeah. The whole idea of sports is that the stakes are incredibly high because it's a win or lose situation every single time, but also anything could happen. So it has that in common with reality TV. The difference is it should not feel like there is manipulation. And that's what felt like happened.
In a championship.
100%. Right? Not, and that's the other thing. I was trying to find examples in both the conversations we had with you and with HatTrick. It was like, I couldn't find a championship that was decided this kind of way. You know, we've had like bad calls, or you've had, you know, big turns in a situation, or you've had a bad call made by one or the other coach or a team or something. And championships have sometimes come down to weird situations, but never like a blatant, what felt like manipulation of a situation. And that's for TV. It did feel like that. And that's the thing about the drive to survive thing, is it's like, I think there's a curse. We talked a lot on the last show about how great Drive to Survive was for this sport. And I still believe that, like, it drew so many fans into this sport that were not even aware of how exciting it was, how interesting it was. It did a great job creating characters out of all of these drivers, all of these team principals. We feel like we know them because you've got these behind the scene looks at them. And a lot of sports, I think, could benefit from that kind of experience. The problem is you are also now setting a bar of expectation in terms of what, quote unquote, like the TV moment is. And I think people want or expect it. Like, how many people responded when you talked to them after this race by saying, whoa, man, but the Netflix series is going to be so good this year. And it's like, that is not what the standard should be here, guys.
Yeah.
We should not be watching, you know, one of the highest, most competitive and most internationally, you know, respected sporting events based on whether or not it'll make for good TV. I'm sorry, that's just not how this should go. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
And anyone who says it was a racing finish, and even Michael Massey to go, we're racing. How? Where do you get a guy that has, like, the cars are almost equal? One guy's got tires that have been on one caution lap. The other guy has 40 racing lap tires. 40, not 40 racing lap tires. Yeah. There's no way Hamilton was going to be able to hold them for half that lap. I think he passed on like turn 2 or 3. It was done. Very it wasn't close. A race at that moment. It was, that's the thing that bugs me, is that you can't just say that. You can't just say, well, we wanted them to go racing. It's because you didn't. You, Michael Massey, know the sport as well as anybody in the world. Yeah. So for you to say, if not the most, for you to say we want them to go racing is like, that is an asinine comment. Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't sit well with me at all. Give me another reason, and then only let 4 of like the 8 or 9 lap cars go by at the time that the safety car is leaving. Like, it's just so wild. And there's something like, I was talking to someone else, and remember when FIFA was investigated for how corrupt they were? Yeah. I have a feeling that the FIA is not far behind in someone investigating them based specifically on this decision. And I feel like Massey has to be fired tomorrow, like before the next season starts.
Well, this is something I was curious about when it happened too, because the responsibility it does lie on him and the organization he represents. Is there any chance that the FIA stands and says we made a mistake?
No, I don't think they do, because like the NFL, like any of these major sporting organizations, they are all about protecting the shield. They're all about protecting the brand. And the reality is that they now this has happened. They have to live with the reality that this has happened. And now they have to not only defend it, but they have to embrace it as if nothing was wrong, because to admit something was wrong is to admit a level of fault that they know is too detrimental to their brand. And I think that the piece of it that's frustrating is that there will probably be some type of quote unquote internal review of the protocol. But if you actually go and read the documents that followed the original challenge that Mercedes made to the stewards right following the race, like the way they followed the protocol of saying, look, we believe there were 2 violations. These are what they are. They lay them out. If you actually read the response, it becomes very clear that the defense that Formula One made of Michael Massey's decision and of the contravening of what those rules are. And we talked about the Rule 48, I think was the one concerning how a restart of a safety car was supposed to, the procedure that was supposed to be followed. I talked about this on HatTrick. But what's interesting is the response to why, like to justify why was the protocol not followed, was simply stated as the racing director has total authority, basically saying the racing director can do whatever he wants. And if that's the case, if that's the defense they want to take, that is a dangerous road to go down, because that sets up a precedent that basically says any of our rules are subject to the interpretation of the racing director on said day. And I don't know, do we really want to be it now? Is it that much different than other sports? Do we not have, some type of arbitrary decisions made on player suspensions in the NFL or in the NHL based on certain situations? Sure, but that doesn't affect the game. Those aren't in game. And I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like there isn't that kind of the kind of stakes that are there.
So does it change anything? What will it change anything? Will there be a moment where the teams and the players aren't, or the racers aren't just going to boycott and say, well, we all know this was horseshit. Let's not do this. And we can't, the sanctity of our sport here is jeopardized. But the fans, like even just the conversation we're having right now, something has to give, something has to change from this, because we can't, there's just no way that this can happen again.
Something has to change, and I don't know what it is. This was a point of contention like 10 years ago in NASCAR, when they would be finishing their races on caution flags and essentially what they call safety cars. And they made it, if there's a safety car within the last 2 laps, it's clear the track, and then basically a formation lap, and then 2 laps, and you get 2 laps to finish the race.
Like sudden death.
Like sudden death, exactly. I don't know if it would be awesome, yeah.
But on even keel.
Even keel. That's the other thing, is they would have to, they'd have to stop and change their tire selections. Or if there's like if there's a caution, I see it's a dangerous thing too, because excitement of, I think it was last year when like one of the first 3 to 5 races, when Lewis blew his tire on like the second lap, on the last lap, on like the second last turn, and you see Max coming up to him, just hoping.
That was Silverstone in 2020. Yeah,
like that's exciting, and just limping to get there, and that's how Verstappen gets his chances. So like, you don't really want to get rid of aspects like that, because they could have easily just called a yellow caution flag and then have Lewis change his tires, but. This is what's going to come of it, is now they have to make a decision that is impossible to make, because they made a decision that should have been super, because they did not make a decision that should have been super easy. And I don't know what I feel like something has to change, because as a fan of the sport, I don't want to have to go through this again. Like I don't want to have to watch every race and go, well, who knows, who gives a shit about the first 40 laps if they're just going to change the rules in the last 5. Like we know it's going to happen, and not only do we know it's going to happen, it happened on the most important race of the last 10 years.
Yeah. And in the last 2 laps of the race, like,
it feels like there was some very poor judgment. I think I also said this, and I don't think I articulated it as well on HatTrick, so I'll say it again here. I think the challenge, obviously, I think the decision making was very poor. I think that's true, but I also think that the bigger piece is, I expect, or I would hope, that officials in any sport, when facing a game deciding decision, let's say a penalty shot in overtime, or a holding call on in overtime, or whatever it is, they should be trained and taught, and especially a race director should be told, you are to always side on the conservative option, because you may take criticism. Look, they would have gotten criticism had that race finished under yellow, but people wouldn't have been challenging the outcome.
They would have said, the fair, reality
is that he was in, like, was it kind of shitty he crossed the line under caution? Sure. The reality is the guy led from lap 1, right?
Yeah.
And 11
he led by 11 seconds.
Yeah.
He never was in question, right? And that's the piece of it that's frustrating. Hamilton, here, I don't think I've said this yet. Hamilton had to fight through 3 blue flags to get ahead of those back markers. All 3 of them were fighting each other for position. So although they did move over, no one held him up dramatically. He fought off the dirty air behind them. He fought off the fact that was closing a gap for Verstappen to catch up to him because he had to contend with in and out of their slipstreams, all three of them. And then Verstappen on those last couple laps would have had to also contend with the same things to catch Lewis. And he never had to compete with that. So already there, the competition part of it has been skewed by letting those back markers through. You can't tell me that, well, Max and him were always supposed to come down to the last lap. It would never have come down to the last lap had Latifi not crashed. So again, there's no justification for the actions taken there. And when you listen to the other drivers, I think that tells you a lot too, because Stroll was pissed. Norris obviously was pissed. Norris had a chance to still catch up and get into fourth, but Stroll was pissed. Ricardo, who's back there, is pissed. Everyone who was in behind Verstappen is like, well, what the hell? Why wasn't I allowed to get ahead? I'm fighting for position in the middle of the field too. And although I'm not fighting for a championship, which is clearly all they were thinking about and all they gave a shit about, I'm fighting for points that there's a lot of money to and from my team here, right? Like there are McLaren and AlphaTauri and all these teams are still fighting in the Constructors' Championship. Like there's still stakes all the way down there. And a decision was made based on two people, and only two people, because those two people happen to be the drama on the day. And that's what's unfortunate. All of it's unfortunate, to be honest with you. But again, as Braydon said, how do you feel now? Like, I'm so over it. I'm just over it. I'm excited for March to come around at some point. I'm sure by that point I'll have moved past it, but it's just like, it feels so sad because when we talked a week ago, we had such excitement. Like I came out of that conversation with the three of us so stoked for the finale. It was like, how could this be any better than Saudi Arabia was? How could you possibly match it? And unfortunately it was just such a disaster.
Well, and in the last two laps again, right? What an exciting race. All 50 laps or whatever it was, and then down into the last two and just all hell breaks loose.
And go back and listen to the announcers too. They know, they're like, well, either we're going to start. There's been a decision made before in a couple races where if you want to finish the race under a green flag, then you just don't let the unlapped cars go by.
Yeah.
Don't let them do it. But and then the announcers go, but if they are going to let them pass, they have to wait a full lap per the rules, and then the race is going to be over. So when the decision was reversed, all the announcers were just like, I don't understand what's going on here. What is happening? Verstappen wins. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Forget Verstappen. Let's go back and talk about this. I don't care about who won the race anymore. Let's let the fans, I want to hear from every single person involved in decision-making as to how it happened and how they can defend it. Because I don't think there's a way, but Jordan's right. It's protect the shield. Protect what you have to do for the brand. You cannot admit anything wrong here. You can't do it. It's just, it'll never happen in any sport. You'll have certain referees, like Michael Massey can go back and do it. If he gets fired, he can go back and be like, I fucked this up. There was a kid in Major League Baseball who threw a perfect game. And Jordan, you brought this up, and a perfect game means 27 batters up, 27 batters out. So nobody gets hit, nobody gets walked, nobody gets nothing. And the umpire missed the last call and called the guy safe. The next day, met the pitcher at home plate and was like, I'm sorry, and told the whole stadium, I messed up. I apologize, in tears, crying, like this kid should have had a perfect game in the record of like maybe 10 of them. And in the history of the 150 baseball years or seasons, it's so the only person that's going to do that could potentially be Massey, because FIA is not going to do it. Verstappen's not going to do it. Horner's not going to do it. So everybody's left upset. And I don't know. I don't know.
Armando Galarraga,
yeah. Pitcher for the
Jim
Tigers.
Joyce.
He was cut.
Jim Joyce was the umpire at first base. Jim Joyce.
Yeah.
It's a frustrating one. It's a very frustrating situation when it happens. But again, that was a regular season game. Now, very special for that pitcher, not a world championship.
Yeah. But Jordan also said it when Jordan and I were talking on Sunday. I said to him, I was like, I'm not watching F1 anymore. It's over for me. I'm so soured on this. And he just goes, well, let's talk in March. And I was like, you're right. I'm going to be back in March, and I'm going to be so excited for that first race. But right now it's not Christmas. It doesn't feel like Christmas right now because of this race.
Fortunately, there are no more races for you to watch.
Yeah.
and Braydon, as you said, like what happens? I hate to be the cynical one, but I don't think anything happens. I really don't. Yeah. I mean, they might tweak a word or two in some of the written.
They're going to have to be clear about
that.
Won't.
I don't think they will. They'll just say we did exactly what the protocol states. He's allowed to make decisions. This is the decision that he made. You don't have to like it. tough shit. And the reality is that like this is the thing now that started to annoy me though, is like all of the additional coverage that comes out. So it's like, whoa, a lot of people close to Lewis suggest he just may give up and never race again. Fuck off. Lewis Hamilton will race next year. Come March, he and Toto will be over this. Well, they won't be over this, but they will have accepted what the reality of this is.
The revenge
into
path
fucking rocket fuel,
and
they will be on the revenge path. And guess what? There is one thing that is better than scandal in sport, and it's a fucking comeback. People love a comeback.
People love a comeback.
And now the guy who had nobody touching him, and the guy who had the team that had nobody touching them gets to be the underdog. Not underdog in the sense that people really think Mercedes isn't going to show up. No, but they're not the champions, or at least he's not the champion anymore. And he gets to now come back and claim his throne. And it makes it so much bigger and more dramatic. And that's what part of the sport is. And that is why we will all get sucked back up into it.
Oh, so this is what you're saying this is a good thing now.
No, I'm not. I'm just pointing out the cynicism of the reality of how this thing always works.
Oh yeah.
Is that the FIA and Formula One will edit their little Netflix show perfectly. People will move through a place of acceptance. They will get through the stages of grief. They will get to a place of acceptance, and then they will move on to next season. We will have our first show of Pit Stop next year, fired up and excited to go on Hamilton's comeback tour. That's just what will happen. Unfortunately, we would love to see reform. We'd love to see change. We'd love to see accountability. I'm telling you right now, you're very unlikely to see any of it. That's all I'm saying.
And with that, let's take a break.
All right.
Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays from the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It is the season of giving, and what better gift to give than some fresh swag from the Ordinary Podcasting merch store. We have a brand new holiday collection, t-shirts and toques, all with special logo designs for the holiday season. You can head over to the Ordinary Podcasting merch store at ordinarypodcasting.com. Check it out, see what's there. This is a very special limited edition run of merchandise that will only be available until the end of 2021. So get over there, grab some fun swag, share it with your friends, promote your favorite podcasts, and let us know what you think on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Okay, let's tee up this 2022 season by starting off. Let's talk about each of these teams here briefly. I'm going to start with the team that finished in 10th of the Constructors Championship this year, and that is the famous United States team Haas Ferrari, technically. Mick Schumacher's rookie season, Mazepin's rookie season. I don't think Mazepin finished it seemed like he finished less than 50% of the races that he drove in.
I don't know if it's that low, but he definitely
finished them.
If he finished them. What's the future of Haas? Is this their last season in F1?
Like the one coming up ahead of us, you mean?
Up ahead, yeah.
I think, I know that at the beginning of the year, they didn't upgrade their car at all. They saved, because of the new rules, they saved all their money and all their points for next year. So they were going into this knowing that they weren't going to have a car. They also went into it with a driver who, one driver with a legendary name that probably deserves to be in the sport, but they also brought in a driver in Mazepin who I think it's unfair the way people talk about Mazepin, because I don't think that he's a bad driver. I just don't think he's a driver that deserves to be in F1 or just isn't ready to be in F1. You see him you see him at press conferences crying, saying, I don't want to be bad. I'm trying. I'm out there trying my best. I just think that he was put into position because of the money that his family brings to Haas for him to get a seat. And he just wasn't ready for that seat yet. So I don't want to jump on him for being a bad driver and a dangerous driver. I just don't think he's ready to be in that spot yet. He never got out of qualifying 3. Schumacher was in qualifying 2 twice. I mean, it's something to look forward to. And Mazepin, he finished 4th. He didn't even finish in the top 20 drivers of the season in standings, in driver standings. He is the 21st. Robert Kubica raced twice and beat him. So that's rough. There's only 20 drivers, and he's the 21st in driver standings.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I don't think he's a bad driver. He's in not the greatest. He's in the worst car that there is on the track. But also the whole thing with privilege and being put in a position here where he comes with the funds to be in. Like when you talk about how he is on this team, it doesn't bode well when you talk about the accessibility of the sport, inclusion, the equity when it comes to the sport. Like that is a problem.
Yeah, but that's not uncommon, right? Like, I mean, Stroll is in the same place. A lot of these guys
I completely
come from
agree,
privilege.
but that's a terrible system that this sport has.
It's sports. Unfortunately, nepotism is not uncommon, especially in these sports. No, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just pointing out it's not uncommon. The only thing I'll say, like, so when you look at Haas and you look at their two drivers, obviously, as Tyler says, this was a throwaway season in many ways, but I think they also did treat it as a great opportunity to give both of their young drivers, baptism by fire, as much opportunity to try different setups, different things, learn the cars, learn parts of what they're planning to do with their next car. Their hope, as many of the bottom teams, is that this new car design gives them at least a bit more of a competitive opportunity. It's hard because if you recall, about 4 years ago, Haas was actually like a mid-table team. They were actually competing a lot more. They were in a lot more of the races that they were competing in. They just were having sort of unlucky finishes. Even go back to the very first season of Drive to Survive, which I think was coming up on 2018 season, would have been 2018 season. And in that year, I mean, they were competing, I think, for fourth in the constructors by the end of it. And they had two really good drivers in Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean. And Roman Grosjean, had so much potential when he had first started driving. He was on sort of the tail half of his career by that point. But yeah, I think Haas has really found the last couple of years to be very, very difficult. And I don't think it's an unfair question to say, are we watching a team near the end of their life? Possibly. They may need to start looking for a new namesake and a new title, ownership group, because I'm not sure that Gene Haas has the patience to sit around through this long of a rebuild. But I think next year will really be the deciding factor. And they have two good young drivers.
Okay.
Anyway, I know we want to keep these all short, so I won't belabor Haas because we got to get through.
We can't spend all our time on Haas.
I hear that Porsche is interested in F1 team. So
well, they've been there before, and they maybe want back in for sure.
Another famous car, Alfa Romeo, racing Ferrari, finished with 13 points this year. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I'll go first. I'll go first on this one. I mean, Alfa Romeo. But Alfa Romeo had a couple storylines that I do think are important, and again, we'll try to keep it close. It was the end of Kimi Räikkönen's career. He got 10 points for the team, but the truth is, again, this is a bottom team that's trying to figure out what's next. They're about to get a really, really good driver. In Valtteri Bottas, obviously someone who has had much more success than any driver that Alfa Romeo's had in a little while. And they're also going to get a new young driver who will need to grow and experience. So again, I think Alfa Romeo is right where we had expected them to be. And I don't think we're going to see a huge change next year, but I don't know.
What's the name of that driver? What's the name of that Alfa Romeo driver? I can't think of his name now. The new kid coming up.
Zhao, I believe it is.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Guanyu Zhao.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see Bottas in that lead role, because they're going to give him most of the attention. They're going to give him what he wants. He'll actually get to be treated kind of in his twilight years like a star. Unfortunately, I think he'll be fighting for like 9th and 10th instead of where he'd like to be at 1 and 2. But that's still that's the beauty. That's the best thing about F1 is if you're a middle of the pack car, you're just expected to be a middle of the pack car, and you're happy about it. And your fans are happy about it. The understanding of you not being able to win races is one of the magnificent things about when Haas doesn't finish last place, it's like pandemonium in the garage. It's like unbelievable. We beat Williams. This is crazy. Like that's why I love the sport, is everybody has their competitive placement, and they're just trying to one up, just trying to get one ahead.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yep. So you just mentioned it, Williams had a pretty good season this year. They had a lot of different narratives. They obviously losing Sir Frank and his passing this year was a big moment, but also George Russell. Like this was finally he had finally gotten to the place in his trajectory to be leaping off to Mercedes next year. But he had some really, really great finishes. They finished with 23 points this year.
Yeah, it came later in the year for them, a little bit into August. I think both races in August, Hungary and Belgium, I want to say, they got 10 points in each of those two races, which is huge. He was, George Russell, I think, we know what we're going to get an amazing year out of him next year at Mercedes. He deserves to be in a really competitive car. He's an amazing driver. But what he was able to do with Williams, a team that came under new management, new ownership, moving away from the Williams family for the first time, has a bright future, I think, as the team again. They have a direction again, I would say, after struggling for a few years. And we saw glimpses of that. But they're also a team that's going to have to figure out what's next. They're going to get a good driver in Albon next year to see what they can do with them. But losing George Russell will hurt because that, he was their star. But Williams, I think, is in a transition too. And it was nice to see them after a couple of really bad years, at least be up in the points.
Yeah. Well, to finish seventh, ahead of Haas and Alfa Romeo. That's huge for them. That's great. And Russell, unbelievable year, obviously, like storybook year, just the kid that everyone watched race and go, he needs a better car. He's going to be a star. Yeah. So it's good to see that. Unfortunately, the Canadian Latifi also ruined the sport for everybody just because he couldn't stay in the goddamn track in the end of the season.
Oh, he feels so bad, I'm sure.
It's interesting. No one's talked to him, eh? Like, where's his? He wasn't at any of the press conferences. He must have gone into like witness protection.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine being him right now? Could you imagine being him right now?
So where's that example? We won't do it right now, but there's got to be an example of that guy in other sports. Like, who's the spoiler?
The guy who caught the ball
the baseball
at the Cubs game.
Yeah,
the baseball game. The guy who caught
couldn't go to the game for 100 years or whatever.
Yeah, banned from the stadium for life or something. Right. Had to go into witness protection. That's the guy that was because Latifi wasn't in the race. Like, I get he was racing, but he had nothing to do with the outcome of everybody else. Yeah. So all he had to do was control the car. Yeah. And nobody would be angry. It would be the greatest finish to a season in the world.
And all those conspiracies have been made now.
Steve Bartman.
That's the guy. Steve Bartman, that's the guy. In a stupid green turtleneck and the headphones, listening to things. Just do what you're supposed to. Poor Latifi. I love Latifi. He's our Canadian guy. I don't like this next segue you're about to make here to Aston Martin.
Well, just boy, stupid Latifi, green is what I was gonna segue.
That would have been good. That would have been good.
This Aston Martin team finishing 77 points this season. This was a dismal year for Aston Martin. This is not at all what they anticipated, having had a pretty successful year in their pink vehicle. Whether or not it was ripped off from Mercedes or not is another conversation from years ago. But where does Aston Martin go from here?
Racing Point was a team that had been through a couple like hellish years organizationally. So this is the first year with Lawrence Stroll and the Aston Martin brand and sort of like the new structure. You would expect some hiccups there. New driver with Sebastian Vettel, obviously experienced driver, but new driver regardless. And I think they're still figuring it out. They definitely slip. But I think that you have to chalk some of that up to a couple of the other teams who have had bad years recently, Ferrari and even McLaren. They're just so much better right now than where Aston Martin is. They just had a better year. And so I think that's part of it.
Yeah. And personally, I miss the pink car. I liked that pink car. Yeah. You're right. I don't like the new green they have now. I think they're trying to be too much like Mercedes when they they have that kind of mint green sometimes on their car. Mm-hmm. But Vettel finished second in Azerbaijan. So he was at one point, it was like, okay, Vettel's back. Vettel's finally coming back. 7 top 10 finishes. Stroll had 9 top 10 finishes, but only highest finish was 6th. It seems like this team should have been above AlphaTauri, above Alpine. They should have been the ones fighting with McLaren. At the beginning of the season, that was their goal, I believe, was we got to beat McLaren. That was our competitive pool. And so I'd say that one of the more, they're right up there with like Haas. We knew it was going to be bad. That Aston Martin might have had the most disappointing season for an overall team in terms of what they wanted their goals to be. Yeah.
And honestly, you guys, I am not a big fan of Lance Stroll. I do not think this guy is a safe driver. He's reckless. He flips his vehicle on many different occasions. I just don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for this team to have that there. And he's been there for like 3 or 4 years now too. Like even before his dad was in.
Yeah, but he's not going anywhere either.
A lot of people are like, oh, Stroll, he's the Canadian guy. I'm like, no. Latifi's Canadian. Stroll is Canadian, but he's like a villain in the Canadian side. Like I agree with you. I don't think he's a safe driver. I don't think he's a good driver. But like I think he probably deserves to be in F1. I think he deserves to be on like maybe a Williams, or he should have earned his keep before just jumping up into the seat that he got. That's the biggest issue with me about Stroll is there's nothing there that's proven that he should be in the car. And he's taking a spot away from someone like Oscar Piastri, who we'll talk about when Alpine comes, that should be in a seat this next year. But that's the thing about Stroll is I don't know if he deserves it. He probably is a good enough driver to be in the F1 because you have to be good to not just crash all the time. We see that with Mazepin, who probably doesn't deserve to be there yet. So I don't know. It's tough.
All right, enough about Stroll. Enough about Stroll. Finishing 6th, AlphaTauri. This is your team, Tyler. They had a great season, like a really great season.
Unbelievable season. I think that Gasly obviously is the reason they had that season. Tsunoda started coming around towards the end there. Like his highest finish was 4th, top 10 6 times, but Gasly podium in Azerbaijan, constantly in the top 6 in qualifying, often 4 or 5, 9 top 6 finishes. His best finish was 3rd. I think that he deserves to be in the conversation for driver of the year. And I say that like I'm a Gasly fan. He's my guy, but just based on what he did with that car and where that car was supposed to be, I think he's put them far above where they should be at this point. And I don't know. I feel like Red Bull I don't think Red Bull's going to bring him up. So this might be Gasly's last year with this team. I think someone else might pick him up. I think that if Alpine picks him up, it could be Ocon and Gasly as a full French team. But AlphaTauri, what an unbelievable year. They also have the best looking car on the track. Those white rims are unbelievable. I love them.
That's awesome. Yeah, they look good. Well, I was going to ask if you thought Red Bull was going to take him back, but it sounds like you're thinking another team might be able to snag him.
Yeah, I think Horner and him don't get along.
That makes sense.
Well, and I think right now the way that Sergio Perez fit into the position of wingman for Max all season, I think definitely is what Red Bull wants and needs. And if we are looking at the beginning of a Max run where they think that they can be competitive in the next couple of years with him too, and they can try to defend his title next year and then maybe another one or win or lose next year. If it's the same kind of season we had here where it's a dogfight to the end, they're going to need that guy. They want that guy who has the experience of Sergio Perez, the competitiveness, but also like the team first mentality. And I think that they just never found that with either Pierre or with Albon, because again, those are young drivers who have careers to like make happen. Whereas Sergio Perez, I think, has accepted the place he has in this sport. He knows he's a good driver. He has chances and will have chances to win. And I think that like, I don't know quite how Red Bull functions. I know with Mercedes, the rule has always been, even in the years Lewis was winning, when you start the season, best driver takes the lead. And if Bottas had been good enough to get out there and win a couple races at the beginning of the year and take it, they would have been putting him in positions to win. He just never was. They did that with Nico Rosberg. And I think if Sergio Perez came out and had a really great season, then they try to run them as 1A and 1B. But the reality is Max is just still so far ahead of whomever they put in that other car. They just need somebody who can support him.
All right. Alpine Renault. Well, what was once Renault now turned Alpine. They had a good season in the standings, but every single race, like I just forgot they were there.
Yeah,
until the end.
That's a great way to put it, though, is because they were quietly good all year.
Yeah.
Ocon won.
Ocon's a great driver. He's a great
driver.
And we saw the return of Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, who had some good battles too, which was exciting to watch, right? Like,
I was about to say, Alonso's best battle was when Ocon was winning and Hamilton was catching up, and he was going to get Ocon. And Alonso said, "No, I'm going to stick my elbows out here, and I'm going to be the best wingman driver I can be for that kid up there. And
Yeah,
he
exactly.
is 30%, 40% the reason why Ocon won that race in Hungary. And like, what a teammate to have at that point. And Alonso also made his podium return this year as well in Qatar. So consistently in the points, best finish 3. I mean, it was a great year for Alpine. Very good year.
Yeah. It didn't seem to start off that way. Like it
No, it took them a little while, but again,
shaky,
like with
especially
Aston
coming
Martin,
off of Renault.
Yeah, like with Aston Martin, I think when these teams restructure and they go under either new management or sort of new organizations, it always takes a little while to figure it out, right? It's such a weird sport that way, where you can have an entire team's infrastructure and entire team's sort of personnel stay the same, but the management structure, the ownership structure sort of shifts. And as they do that, I mean, you'd expect that there'd be some change. The reality is that luckily for them, Renault was still a competitive car prior. They had a bad season in 2020, but before that they were competing for third in 2019 and stuff. So like the infrastructure around that organization has been good, and that team has been good for a while. So I think it was inevitable that they were going to at least compete, and I think they surprised a lot of people, and I think they may do that again next year with the opportunity to be even better at following. They've got 2 amazing drivers, the young and the old.
3. They've got 3. So I just want to make a quick point about Alpine is they're the ones that signed Oscar Piastri. I don't know if I'm saying that last name right, but
Piastri, you're right.
Piastri they are the ones that signed him as a reserve driver. This kid just won the F3 championship 2 years ago, jumped up to F2, won that championship. Yeah. He's only 18 years old. He is going to be like, I've heard him in some articles be like if you have to say the next Verstappen, the next Hamilton, this kid is that. And I hope that he gets a chance to race with somebody for just one race this year. I know it's hard with Alpine, but man, I can't wait. I'm so excited for that kid to get
never hard in the day and age of COVID and sport. Like anything's possible. That one race that George Russell had with Mercedes was pretty exciting last year. Okay, absolutely. This is my team. McLaren finished 4th in constructor standings. A huge Norris fan. I think Norris, next to Lewis, you can't really say Lewis or Max in this, but I think Norris is like one of the best racers in this. He is so good on the track. But I'm a big Ricciardo fan too. I think he's hilarious on and off the track. They finished 4th, and I really thought they were going to be able to finish 3rd, but they just had a couple races where Ferrari got
Ferrari came on late. You know what I mean? No, McLaren came out of the gates really hot. They had a great start to the year. If you remember, at one point, Norris was the only driver. It was the last driver to have still not finished a race without points. At one point, he was in the points in every race, I think for the first 10 races or something. Even when Lewis and Max had races they weren't finishing, Norris has just been steady. And then I think slowly Ferrari's car just caught up to them, and then they just had a better second half of the year, it felt like. And McLaren, I think, started to move towards next year's car, and they sort of accepted that this experiment was done. But it's nice to see the continued, as you say, the continued growth and progression of Lando Norris is really exciting. He is one of those young drivers who's getting the kind of experience that is going to make him a competitor for a championship down the road, the same way Max did in his early years, in the sense that he was leading races that he would end up losing. He was trailing in races and got opportunities to overtake and got opportunities to compete for podiums. That, those are the valuable lessons that every driver kind of picks up along the way. I mean, even going back and looking at a young Lewis Hamilton or a young Sebastian Vettel, those guys had to struggle for a couple years to figure out how this sport was going to sort of fit for them. And then when it clicks, sometimes it just clicks. This year it clicked for Max Verstappen. He put all the pieces together as a driver, right? For him. Lando, I think, is 1 or 2 years away from doing that. The question is, can McLaren get the car to where they need it to be for him to be able to be in a position to compete? And are they ever going to be good enough right now to get up into that top 2? I don't know. But for Lando, great development year.
Yeah.
Lando was unbelievable this year. And both, like, McLaren, like, they had a race where they finished 1-2. Ricciardo won, Norris 2. Norris was leading the Russian Grand Prix until he decided to not pit and put wet tires or intermediate tires. Hamilton pitted, put the intermediate tires on, cost him the race in the few final laps. But Lando Norris had 4 podiums this year.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he was, oh man, that kid. And not only, I will say this one thing about McLaren is their team has the most personality out of their drivers, the most energy, the most smiles. Those 2 drivers in that McLaren team look like they have the most fun every single weekend. And that's something the kids are gonna look up to and go, man, these guys are just out there having fun. And I'm a big fan of Lando Norris too. I think that kid he can fly, baby.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. So finishing above them, Ferrari, another team though, where I'm like, yeah, they did really, really well, but I didn't watch them much. I didn't see them much. I honestly didn't care much, but Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, great driver. Both of them great drivers, but I don't know if this tandem works necessarily. I don't know who your number 1 is here.
Is there ever a tandem that works for Charles Leclerc?
That's a great point, though. I don't know every other team you can choose who is number 1 and who is number 2. This and Ferrari, it might be a good thing because all they're trying to do right now is finish 3rd. And they did that, and they did it so quietly, almost boring like. But they had some moments like Leclerc was going to be on pole in Monaco until he spun his car out in the last qualifying lap and had to switch his drive engine or something, I think, his drive shaft.
His power unit.
They tried to take a penalty to start the race. Like these guys had moments. Sainz this year had the longest active point streak of the season, but like no one ever talked about them. They're just, it was so quiet of a season for Ferrari. Like Sainz also had 4 podiums. His highest finish was 2nd. Leclerc finished 2nd in one race, but Leclerc actually had 1 podium this year, which was surprising, but Sainz had 4. And like it was almost like I'm a big fan of Ferrari as well. I'd go AlphaTauri and then Ferrari would be my number 2 probably, because I was such a huge fan of Leclerc and Sainz before they came to Ferrari. And when they came to Ferrari, I was kind of like, oh, that's a really cool like team. But you're right, they're not very exciting, are they?
Yeah, no, no, not for me. No, definitely not. I mean, I think both of them are maybe more so Carlos Sainz, friendly guys. Charles Leclerc just seems kind of like a bit of a dink. Like he seems like he's a bit too entitled. Like I mean, maybe that's just the thing with race car drivers. They all think that they should be first. There's something with Charles Leclerc where I'm like, I'm not sure, man. I feel like you're just a bit ahead of where you're actually at, or where you think you're a bit ahead of where you're actually at.
Yeah, I would, like, just out of debate, I would disagree with that statement wholly, but because I do like Leclerc, but I do think that it's every driver in there has that like you can see it in Ricardo sometimes too, where it's just like this guy is just a goofball out here. Yeah. I think this is, if we go back and talk about that first season that these teams have, I think Leclerc and Sainz, this was their first year together, was it not?
Yes.
Yes.
Vettel raced.
Vettel was there last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of that with Ferrari. This is the first year. Maybe those 2 guys are friends. And they're like, I don't want to push myself into 1A because my buddy is in 1B. Yeah. So, but maybe it just starts ramping up. Maybe after the first year, the gloves come off and these guys start racing each other as well as they do everybody else out there.
I'd be down for that.
We'll see though, because like I think Ferrari's in this really weird place where like if this was a football team or a hockey team, you'd call them in like they're still in a rebuild. Because if you think back, like 2019 was the first year, I think, in like their entire history that they failed to win a race until like August or something. At that point, they did not win a race this year as a team.
No.
And last year, 2020, I believe, was like their worst performance in the history of Ferrari as far as the points they collected and the place they ended up. They finished, I think, 6th last year in 2020. So for them to bounce back in 1 year to being able to be 3rd again was huge. Obviously, Charles Leclerc is their star. He's been with them now for 3 years, and Carlos Sainz comes in as an already proven asset. So next year, I think, really is the question mark. Can Ferrari reestablish themselves as a competitive constructor chasing team? as they have been through their entire history and where they feel they belong. They are the marquee prestige team of the history of Formula One. Mercedes, obviously, in the hybrid era has become the prestige team, but really this, it's set up in a way that if they're taking gradual steps towards that quote unquote rebuild, depending on how this new car system works, they should be taking that next step next year. And so to see them get third, and as you guys said, kind of under the radar, they're moving in the right direction. And if you're a Ferrari fan, obviously you got to be happy with the result of it.
So what would you say would be a successful 2022 for Ferrari? Because it's going to be Mercedes and Red Bull again next year. Well, I don't know that. Engine, nobody knows.
Do we know that? Yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, that the Red Bull engine is the wild card, and that is a massive wild card. I think we'll get to that when we talk about Red Bull. But what does Ferrari have to do in 2022 to be that next step? Like win one race, win two races, more podiums. What would be the goal for that team?
Yeah, they definitely need to be winning races. They need to be winning races. Yeah. They expect that Charles Leclerc should be competing for the top step of the podium. They expect that. I think they now expect Carlos Sainz should be in the same place. If they are able to get their car to the same competitive place, then they would expect. I mean, in this dream scenario as a team, I'm sure they're looking at this saying this should be a 3-team race. I think F1 is hoping that this can be a 3 or 4 team race. That's their goal with the structural aerodynamic changes that they've made to it. Yeah, all of the changes they're making is to try to make this more competitive. I would say, I think you're right, Tyler. Is the wild card Red Bull's engine? Maybe. I think the fact that we have the largest or the most sort of dramatic change in actual car design since the beginning of the hybrid era, I think is another thing. We're losing the running boards. We're losing the structure. We're going to a bigger tire. We're going to a whole new front and rear wing structure. I think there's a lot of wild cards that are going to come down to whether or not these teams adapt quickly enough to what this car's needs are in terms of the things they do. And we don't know. It's very possible that we have a really shitty year next year with a whole bunch of teams falling off. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of these teams, including Ferrari, have spent a lot of time this year already looking into next year's car and preparing themselves. Ferrari knew that they were in a fight with McLaren, but I think they were surprised as much as anybody that they had a successful second half of the season as they did. Honestly, I don't think that they expected McLaren to fall off. So no, what was your question? What do I expect, or what would they expect?
What do they need? 2022. What would be a successful, that next step that you talked about?
They want to be winning races. Next step they want to be winning races. They want to be taking points off of Lewis and Max.
That's right. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And they want to be taking the fight to McLaren as opposed to chasing McLaren. They want to expect that they are in third place and dominating third place, fighting for second, fighting for first. That's what they would expect, I think. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think they're positioned to do it. Honestly, I think Ferrari's back. I think we should be expecting in the next couple of years to definitely be seeing Charles Leclerc say, hey, I'm after a world championship here. I don't know if it's next year or a year from now, and I don't know if it's until Lewis is gone. I don't know what that looks like. But I think that's the expectation. This is going to be Max and Charles could very well be the two guys we're talking about going into a final race in the next couple of years head to head.
Well, I don't know. So long as you put Norris in that.
Well, you can put Norris in it, but I think that Leclerc could be a wild card in the next couple of years as well. I think Leclerc has the talent to be the top driver at the end of the year's standings. As long as Ferrari gives him that car, I think he can do it. And it's just that potential is there. It is there. But you're not wrong. Norris is coming quick. Norris is coming for Leclerc quick. There's so many drivers here that could make the next couple of years exciting. It's unbelievable. If only they just stuck to the rules.
So speaking of rules, Red Bull Racing Honda, who will no longer be Honda next year, finishing second in the constructor standings. I'm also going to say, let's just talk 1 and 2 here. So Mercedes finishing first. Can't really call this a consolation prize, can you?
Yeah, it is money wise. I mean, they still win the championship 8 years in a row. It still matters. I mean, it matters in a lower sense because it isn't the prestige of the athlete winning. But I mean, you can't tell me that the guys who sit in the big offices and, wherever the hell they're headquartered in Berlin, probably. I don't know where they're headquartered in Germany, but the reality is somebody out there is saying, yeah, we're 8-time champions in a row. That still matters. And it does matter to the history of the sport. When we look back, we will continue to talk about the dominance of Mercedes. Is it unfortunate they couldn't go both of them? Yes, it is. It was wrong. They should have by all means. Lewis should be our champion. He isn't. Mercedes deserved to win this championship. They dominated the constructors part of it. Although this is definitely the first year that they had a true competitor nipping at their heels, because it really came down to Bottas and Perez for who was going to give the constructors championship to their team.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, it's a weird thing with Red Bull, because Verstappen probably, as much as I hate to say it, probably is the driver of the year, even though he had the car. To do what he did every single race to Hamilton is pretty incredible.
Oh yeah.
And that's the crappy thing with the way he won it, is because he deserved to win it. He deserved to win it just as much as Lewis deserved to win it until he didn't deserve to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but Red Bull's future, like, I think Perez with Verstappen is the perfect partner. I couldn't think, because Perez wants to win. He won one race this year in Azerbaijan. He's got 5 podiums. He has a career that he's proud of. And sure, I bet that a little bit further into the next season, the season after that, he's going to want to win more races. But right now, for what he did, this is something that also doesn't get talked about. For what Perez did to Lewis Hamilton in that last race to hold Hamilton up was beautiful. That driving that he did to keep Hamilton at bay was some of the best driving we've seen all year. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. But the one thing I'll say about Red Bull is it's such a movie like quote thing to go, oh, well, Honda's leaving, and then just kind of like leave 3 beats and then go, I guess we'll build our own engine. Like, how egotistical is that? That's like a Batman thing to say. It's like, well, I guess we'll just build it, won't we? Like, why not go and get an engine from somebody else? That's already kind of there.
They want others to come and get an engine from them.
Okay, but they do. That's definitely the business part of it. But let's just pump the tires on that for a second. So you're right, Tyler. They are building their own power unit, but they have entered a 3-year deal with Honda to consult and design the engine. So it's still,
we're not going to call it Honda.
No, it is not a Honda engine, but it is a Honda inspired engine. And until the new power units for the sport are introduced, I believe in 2025. So that's the next. There's every couple of years we have these sort of full structural changes in terms of how the technology works. So as we talked about, the actual aerodynamic and design of the car, the biggest change we've had in about a decade is coming this year. You're going to see these cars, they look completely different structurally. But the power units inside them are pretty much the same. The Mercedes engine that was in the Mercedes this year with some minor changes is going in that car. There's a few things that have to be different for the new design of the physical car, but for the most part, it's the same hybrid engine, give or take, we've seen for the last 10 years. It constantly improves.
Okay.
But with
I didn't know that 3-year deal. Sorry to cut you off real quick. I didn't know that 3-year deal. I thought that at the beginning of the next season, that Honda had to wipe their hands clean from it. But
they have to wipe their names off of it. It will be a Red Bull branded engine. It will just be with a lot of, let's say, former Honda engineers. And I mean former as in until last Sunday, they worked for Honda. Now they work for Red Bull engineers who are designing this. And it'll be if you were to take it apart, it's going to look a lot like a Honda engine. Let's just put it that way. They're using their technology to develop their own engine. When they get to the new power units in 2025, I think that's the real step towards Red Bull stepping forward and saying, this is our engine that we have built. But in the next 3 years, it's kind of that transition towards that full time. So
is AlphaTauri using that same engine?
Yes.
The same Red Bull? Okay.
Yes.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, the entire Red Bull brand will.
Yeah.
But the same way, there's only 4 power units, right? There's only 4 power units right now in the sport, right? So there's the Ferrari, Mercedes, the Renault, and what was Honda, and now will be Red Bull. So,
right. Okay, gents, any final thoughts on what to expect for next season?
Well, let's just touch on Mercedes for 1 second, just
No,
formally.
let's not.
I just want to say this. I think what's hard,
Yes.
we talked about it at the beginning, but I do think it's part of it. It's hard to lose. Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to lose under normal circumstances. It's much harder to lose when you feel, I think rightfully, that something was unjustly taken from you, right? There's been two different parts of that, and I think both of them are fair. I'm not going to criticize either side of it. I think the way that Toto Wolff and the formal Mercedes brand has responded to this is fair. I think that they feel like they have been, if not cheated, done a great disservice, and a great injustice has occurred. And I think that they have every right to respond the way they have, which is, they lawyered up, they went and appealed, they did everything that I think Red Bull would have done under the exact same circumstances. And I think that Christian Horner, frankly, is a hypocrite for suggesting that this seemed desperate. I'm sorry, Christian, you've whined and complained about every fucking part of that Mercedes car that you couldn't figure out for the last decade. So stop with that. But I want to say that when you are the New York Yankees, or you are the LA Lakers, or you are the big bad, whether it's the Patriots or the Dallas Cowboys, whatever organization you want to say, when you are that guy that everybody wants to take down and see fail, you get under that microscope, and everybody, oh, you're poor losers, oh, you're whatever it is. Lewis Hamilton, for all the criticism he gets, for all of the I think disrespect he often gets, for wearing his heart on his sleeve, often he's emotional, often he is abrasive in some of the ways he communicates, but he is true to what he believes in. He communicates about what he believes in, and the dignity and the decency with which he displayed, I think, right after that race, immediately congratulating Max Verstappen, his father going and congratulating Max Verstappen, and his father only days after Max Verstappen's father said horrible things about Lewis Hamilton in the Dutch press. The class is a masterclass in decency, in sportsmanship, and in respect. He knew the team was going to have to challenge it. He, I'm sure, was furious, angry beyond belief. I think also in disbelief and probably in shock, to be completely honest. But I think that to me is the sign of a true champion. That is the guy who says, I don't like how this went down. I don't feel comfortable with how this went down, but I'm not going to self-pout. I will be the face of Mercedes in this moment, so that the guys in the back can go and do the stuff they have to take care of, get the lawyers up, do whatever they have to do. I'm going to take the high road here, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I just wanted to say that.
He's a knight now.
I think he's a knight. I think he is also the guy that said over the last 2 days, and eventually, I think it was last night and earlier this morning, he's the guy that told Mercedes, I do not want to look like a poor loser. Let's just drop this and get them next year. Let's just do what we do and win next year, because I have the talent to do it. We have the car to do it. Let's just, instead of winning 10 races, let's go out and win, or 9 races or whatever it was. Let's go out and win 12. Let's go out and do what we do best, which is race cars and be the best F1 team in the world. So it's like, this is not going to get us anywhere. It which I disagree with. I think it could have, maybe, if it really people got into it, but eventually probably not. I don't know. The FIA won't admit wrong. But to just be like, we're going to get them next year, let's not worry about it. That is, you're right, Jordan. That's leadership. And that is also knowing that it's not over. You can win again. You will get that 8th title next year. And if it's not next year, it's the year after that. So they still were the constructors. Bottas had a disappointing season, if we're going to throw his name in this topic, but it's Lewis Hamilton is still this sports champion in terms of the last decade. So and Verstappen's won one. Yep. So let's see what happens next year.
And Tyler, what's he going to do next year?
I think Jordan hit in the spot. Everybody loves an underdog story, and you have just made the greatest driver in the history of F1 the underdog. And if you aren't scared about that, then you don't understand the scenario, because he's angry. Whatever Toto said today about him walking away from the sport, that's bullshit. Toto is being Toto right now. He's not talking to Hamilton. Hamilton is in the fucking the whatever he does to train. He's in the gym right now preparing for next year. And if you aren't scared of that, then you don't understand what is happening, because he is going to come out next year, and he is going to dominate F1.
Yeah, I mean, if he's this sport's Tom Brady, right? And you don't bet against that.
Yeah.
You just don't.
You don't.
Does
bet
Tom
against
Brady win every Super Bowl he went to? No. Go ask Eli Manning about that. But Tom Brady also then picked up the pieces and went, all right, let's go back and do it again. We're going to run it back.
And again.
That's right. And look, he hadn't had this yet. He hadn't had some guy come up and try to take something from him.
Who are you talking about, Max or Michael Massey?
Yeah, exactly. but that's the thing, that we haven't seen this Lewis yet. We haven't seen what Lewis is capable of this year. Tyler's right that Lewis, I think, recognizes what hills he is willing to die on and knows when the battle is lost and knows when to pick up the pieces and say, let's go back to work. He does that a lot. We've seen that throughout the season when it looked like Max was running away from it. I don't know if you remember some of those radio calls at the end of races, but he constantly was reminding the engineers, guys, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. We've done this before. We've been here before. And that is the other thing that now, if I'm a Red Bull fan or if I'm a Max Verstappen fan, I'm just gonna temper my excitement for a moment. Enjoy the celebration, whatever. You can do whatever you want. Here's the reality. When you have a champion, like a multi-time champion who has something taken from him, that's not something you want to be. Max Verstappen has never defended a championship. He doesn't know what's coming for him now, right? He's the guy. Look, he's going to put the number 1 on his car. You want to talk about cocky? We haven't seen that in Formula One in a while.
Who's the last driver to do that?
I don't know.
Who's the last driver to do that?
It's before my time in the sport, because Lewis has never done it. Lewis has always taken the road of, I'm going to keep the 44 on my car. But you have the right as the champion to put number 1 on your car.
Vettel.
There you go. So it's a Red Bull thing, isn't it?
2004.
It's a Red Bull thing. Yeah. That sounds like Christian Horner, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's 100% Christian Horner doing that. And the thing, though, I will say the one thing that scares me about Max, if I have to defend the other side, is I think that he's the Kobe Bryant to Lewis being Michael Jordan. Like when someone said to Kobe Bryant, don't look, the first game he played against Michael Jordan, his teammate said, don't look him in the eyes. And Kobe said, why not? I don't think you understand. I'm the same animal. I'm the same beast. So don't tell me not to do that, because I'm built from the same cloth that he's built from. So if I don't want to defend Verstappen because I don't like him, but I do believe that he could be that same type of person that Lewis Hamilton is. I just know that Lewis Hamilton has got 8 years of proving it.
Yeah. And he's
10 years of proving, whatever.
He's a Sir Goat.
Sir Goat.
Oh, well, and and again, now he's got something to earn back, right? This is Tiger Woods. This is Tiger Woods coming back too. We don't ever.
How many analogies are we gonna use?
That's my point. This is what sports does. This is what I was trying to say earlier. This is exactly what sports wants. This is exactly what it wants. This is what everyone who ever cheers for anybody wants. You want that comeback, and I'm telling you right now, guys, we'll be here this time next December having the same kind of conversations, because it's going to be just as dramatic next year.
I hope we're not talking about the final. But I'm still getting the sense here, Jordan, that you are glad that this has happened this way.
No, I am not glad it happened this way, but I am coming to some level of acceptance.
Okay, great.
Well, yeah, before all week, I was like, I'm not watching F1 anymore. I'm done with it. I don't want to deal with the off season. And now that we've had this conversation and we've kind of all brought up next year, I'm kind of like, man, I can't wait for Lewis to come back. When is that race? When is that first race? Because I was not a Lewis Hamilton fan, but now I want to see that comeback. You're right. I want to see him come back and stick it to this kid who's way too cocky of a driver to begin with.
That's right. Well, you and I, Tyler, were together watching Tiger Woods walk up 18 to win the Masters a few years ago, right?
Oh, what a moment. Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. The truth here is that if Lewis Hamilton can pull this off, it'll be even sweeter than it would have been this year. Honest to God.
Yeah.
Because it will feel like he's gone back and had to really earn something. And I think that that's the opportunity he now gets to have. And that just increases the legend of Lewis Hamilton, right? He's already the greatest. Yep. I think as far as I'm concerned, he's already the greatest, right? It's now just a question of, can you go and earn it one more time? And it will be even sweeter. I think this has been great group therapy.
Yeah, I think so too.
Hopefully for the listeners.
If we're doing sports analogies, I don't even know if the other listeners listen to or watch other sports, but all the greats have had the comeback story.
Yeah,
Tiger Woods, comeback story. Michael Jordan left the sport, comeback story. Tom Brady lost to the Giants twice in the Super Bowl. Comeback story. Leaves the Patriots.
Goes and wins
Another
in Tampa
comeback
Bay.
story.
Yeah.
It's always these guys finding the moments that actually defines their careers. And for Lewis Hamilton, if he wins next year, that is a defining moment in what is an argument that'll settle the best driver to ever race.
There you go. Well, thanks guys. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks everybody for listening to the Pit Stop Podcast this season. We will be back revved up and ready for the first race this season in Bahrain, March 18th. You can see our first cars on the track for qualifying, or maybe that's their practice, qualifying on the 19th and the race on the 20th. Thanks everybody. Thanks Tyler. Thanks Jordan.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Always a pleasure.
And we'll see you next season. The Pit Stop Podcast is presented by HatTrick Sports and is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. The show is produced by Jordan and Braydon Dowler-Coltman each week, but mainly Jordan. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening. The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.